Hi, everybody, and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Jay Harness. And I'm your host, Jay Harness, and it's great to have you here today. And I'm particularly honored to have one of my clinical heroes as my guest today. Dr. Arash Asher has been the Director of Cancer Survivorship and Rehabilitation at Cedars-Sinai Cancer Center in Los Angeles since 2008. He has a special interest in physical and rehabilitative needs of cancer survivors who continue to experience the effects of their cancer and its treatment. His clinical expertise involves managing these symptoms from a rehabilitation and integrative perspective, since many of his patients are interested in non-pharmacological treatment options. I first encountered Dr. Asher as one of the featured speakers in the documentary film Moving Through Cancer, which provides viewers with an excellent overview of the discipline of exercise oncology. Arash, welcome. It's really great to have you here today.
Jay, the honor is completely mine. Thank you for having me.
So, we're all interested in your backstory. As you and I have discussed, not a lot of your colleagues, you're board certified in physical medicine rehabilitation, and not a lot of your colleagues are really interested in this area. So, we are all interested in finding out why you have had an interest and things that we can do to promote exercise in cancer rehab.
Well, I think like many of us, my story started in medical school, and when you get this amazing experience to rotate with many different clinicians with different backgrounds. And I remember during my oncology rotation, I loved that group, that community, and those patients. But then when I thought about it, and no offense, because I know you're an esteemed surgeon, it wasn't the surgical part that interested me, and it wasn't even the oncology part about figuring out what chemo regimen would be appropriate for this particular person. It was this art of thinking about how we're going to put this person's life back together after going through such an incredibly difficult and especially in those times grueling regimens. And there was no delineated path of, well, how do you put a cancer survivor's life back together? But that, long story short, led me to rehab medicine. And I was very fortunate that cancer rehabilitation emerged as a subspecialty right when I was doing my training. And so that's kind of how it all came together, was this kind of wish to help put someone's life back together after going through cancer treatments.
Oh, that's beautifully stated. And you did your fellowship at MD Anderson. What was that like, Arash?
Incredible. MD Anderson is an incredible educational institution. It's probably the largest, one of the largest cancer hospitals in the world. They started the first cancer rehab fellowship when I was there in 2007, 2008. Now there's maybe seven or eight or nine around the country. So it's really blossomed since then.
And I know you and I have spoken a little bit about your national organizations and what we can do to have them become more interested in this. You and I agree we've got a huge amount of momentum going on, particularly in light of the challenge clinical trial presented at ASCO last year. So share with us what you think your national organization will do to support our efforts here.
So I think clinically, right, we've already adopted these ideas, but I think you're right. We need to make political change and formal endorsements to help with this momentum. Um, we could maybe debate this. Um, I hope that we can speak directly not just to these clinical and administrative boards, but to our cancer survivors because right, we need a grassroots, movement to make sure that everyone is engaging in this medicine that makes such a big difference.
And tell us what you've done to motivate your medical oncologists there at Cedars-Sinai to make referrals. Because one of the things we've learned is if physicians make the referrals and not just hand out brochures, if they actually make the referrals, the patients will show up and they usually connect very positively when the referrals are made. But the key here is actually getting the referrals made. So how has that worked for you at Cedars?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, there was a story when I first started, and I was giving a lecture to a group of oncologists about the emerging science of all the benefits that we were learning about exercise for cancer survivors. And I remember there was an oncologist who kind of pulled me aside, and he said, this is nice that you have this enthusiasm about this, but let's face it. We're never going to change our patients' behavior. So let's not waste your time. Let's not waste my time. If they're going to exercise, they're going to exercise. And if they're not, there's nothing we can do. And I remember I had nothing to say. I was right. I had a full head of hair at the time. I was very naive. And I just kind of nodded my head. And then I remember a couple weeks later, I went to a conference and there was like a medical history component to this. And the speaker was talking about smoke enemas used in the early 1800s for treating cancer, headaches, worms, infections, all kinds of things. And the point being that patients laid down and accepted a smoke enema for one reason. It was because their doctor suggested and promoted it. And then the light bulb kind of clicked. Like, your patients went through surgery, other patients go through intensive chemo and stem cell transplants. The only reason a patient would do that is because a clinician they trusted told them that we believe this is in your best interest. And I think we could have both agree that exercise is easier than a smoke enema. And I think it's easier than chemo and radiation and surgery. But I think it's incumbent upon us. I blame us for not promoting it in the way that at least historically we should have been.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. And what I have found is over this last 7, 8 years that I've been involved is that of my medical oncology, radiation oncology, and surgical oncology colleagues, at least 85% of them, Arash, are not familiar with the science. I've often said if we had this much science for a new surgical procedure, my word, it would have been standard of care 10 years or more ago, you know? So we do have a task. This is the reason I launched cancerfitness.org. We've got to educate our own colleagues. And what you just said is absolutely spot on. Tell us more about your approach to the individual patients as far as your integrative approach. Do you have one sort of philosophy of how you work with each patient?
Well, I really believe in agency, and the agency of our patients. The famous Nietzsche quote, "He who has a strong enough why will figure out the how." So when I have a visit with our survivors, our patients, even if you just spend 1 or 2 or 3 minutes on the why,
Yeah.
on how exercise can change your biology, help with bone health, help with fatigue, reduce recurrence rates, and go on and on and on. I'm not going to go through it because you know this better than anyone. Um, I do believe that having a why, then we could figure out the how. And one of the things that we did at Cedars is we created, in modeling after cardiac rehab, what we call our Cancer Exercise Recovery Program, which is a 3-month long program where we show the how. Like, right, we have patients come in with our exercise physiologists that are trained and certified, um, going through the mechanics, but also, we're not here to keep them forever, hopefully giving them the momentum so that they can then continue on their own afterwards.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, you are obviously a Simon Sinek fan. You know Simon Sinek. His
Oh,
book, well, his book is Start with Why.
is that right? Okay.
Oh my gosh, Rosh,
You gave me another thing on my reading list, but I have to
yeah,
read them.
start with what? And you're absolutely right. I'm the advisory chief medical officer at Maple Tree Cancer Alliance. Maple Tree is the largest provider of certified exercise oncology specialists in the country. And Karen Wonders, who founded Maple Tree, often tells the story that her patients have said to her they were more afraid of starting the exercise than they were to receive chemotherapy.
That's amazing.
And then when you think about it now at Maple Tree, they've got a database of 20,000 patients right now. Only about 12 to 13% of those patients were exercising at all before their diagnosis. I don't know in the greater LA area what it's like, but back in the Midwest, Maple Trees out of Ohio, that number did not surprise me at all. But I love your approach. Start with the why. You're absolutely right. And my assignment for you, my good friend, is to learn more about Simon Sinek because what he talks about are the early adopters. And Arash, you are a classic early adopter. You get the why, then you start building a small circle of people who get it with you. That circle keeps getting bigger and bigger. And then whammo, all of a sudden everybody gets it. And we've got the science behind us. But going to your patients and get, I really love that approach. Well, listen, as we get near the end of this, are there any final thoughts you'd love to share with our audience?
Well, maybe what one idea I want to revisit, and I know this is opening up a can of worms, but I know the exercise physiology world has spent a lot of time thinking about exercise prescriptions, which we usually think of as like the type of exercise, the frequency, the intensity, the duration, etc. But what I think we haven't spent as much time thinking about is the where. Does it matter if we engage in this activity on a busy boulevard, in a gym, or my other deep interest recently, or in green nature preserves, right? And it doesn't have to be a national park necessarily, but somewhere where there are trees. And I think, we already know there's a literature from Japan and other areas thinking about how nature may and reduce stress pathways, improve natural killer cell counts and immune functioning, and offer a whole other set of benefits. I think there's a great opportunity to delineate the role nature may play for our cancer survivors as well. That's one of the projects I'm personally working on.
Oh, well, listen, you now schedule yourself for a follow-up conversation with Jay
Okay.
Harness. All
Yeah,
right.
that
Because
would
I
be
absolutely
great.
agree with you. I've got to introduce you to some of the folks I've met in Europe who absolutely agree with your philosophy. Well, Dr. Asher, I cannot thank you enough for being with us here today. It's really been a treat. Let me encourage everyone to please visit with us at cancerfitness.org. We have all sorts of written blogs, we have videos, and we have all sorts of other resources. So until the next time, this is Jay Harness saying thank you very much, and please remember to keep moving.